So haggling, it's not a skill that I use often here in the US. I imagine I would like to flex my bargaining skills when I buy my first car or my first house, although who knows when that'll happen in this economy. But for now, my application of haggling is limited to just Facebook Marketplace. Although in China, it's actually expected to negotiate price, pretty much anywhere except for supermarkets and chain stores. I distinctly remember when, as a child, my grandpa got into such a ferocious and animated exchange with a shopkeeper that I actually started crying. I really thought that my 70-year-old grandpa was about to duke it out in the middle of the mall. But at the end, he was the victor, snagging a couple of porcelain vases with a ludicrous discount, and also getting a hearty theatrical performance out of it all. I didn't appreciate the art of negotiating price until last year. There are so many subtleties to haggling. The calculation of figuring out your first price to offer, the drama of pretending to walk away, the ability to transcend language barriers with just a calculator or a pen and pencil, to communicate price coupled with frowns or head nods, depending on how it's going. Beyond the benefit of the obvious price discount at the end of what is hopefully a successful negotiation, haggling also has cultural significance. China as a country has its roots in Confucianism, which is a philosophy that focuses more on the means rather than on the ends, on the process and not the goal. Of course, the final price must be profitable for the shopkeeper, but the process of negotiating is an opportunity to demonstrate the value of a product, and in a sort of weird roundabout way to develop rapport with your customer. For example, after my grandpa had successfully won his discounted vases, the shopkeeper invited him for tea. The fiery drama that had just unfolded minutes prior quickly melted away into camaraderie, shared over sunflower seeds and stories. In fact, one of my favorite memories in China began with a negotiation. At Tsinghua, campus is so large and sprawling that most students will purchase a bike to get from their dorms to their classes. However, most students are there for 4 years. I was only there for 1. At the beginning, I thought I would save money, yeet myself around campus on my 2 own feet, and, make do. But in October, after a month of schlepping around on foot, coming just a little bit late to every single meeting, I decided that it was finally time to buy a bike. I walked into our local bike shop, which was really no bigger than a 1-car garage. Outside of the shop, there were lines of bikes, new, old, shiny, rusty, and at the end of the line of the bikes, there was parked a stern-looking old man sitting on a plastic stool. I hesitated. Honestly, this guy looked intimidating, but I pulled myself together, gave myself a mini pep talk, and dove in with my shaky Chinese. I want a cheap bike that will get me through the year, I explained. He raised his eyebrows. You can either get something cheap or you can get something that will get you through the year. Not both, he replied gruffly. I ended up finding a used bike. This was a bike that a former student had used for a couple months before she ended up selling it and upgrading to an electric bike. Coupled with a brand new lock, the total price was 330 renminbi, which is about $47 in today's exchange rate. After a series of back and forth, me doing my best rendition of pretending to walk away, I successfully negotiated it down to 310 renminbi, which is about $45. So at the end of the day, I saved only $2 and about 6%. Although the bike shop owner seemed annoyed throughout the entire exchange, obviously with my shaky Chinese, I was also not at my best, we all lightened up at the end. We cracked a few jokes, chatted a bit about my bad Chinese, about life outside China, and waved goodbye. A couple weeks later, I rode the bike back to the shop to get some air pumped into the tires. As I rode up, the bike shop owner shouted out, "Where'd you get that bike?" I answered back, "You sold me this bike." And he replied, obviously very surprised, "It's still in one piece?" Definitely not something you want to hear from the guy who sold you a bike. But at the end of the day, the bike was my dream bike. It was cheap and it lasted me the entire year, somehow. Although I'm sure I could have negotiated it down further, I was happy with the price. The bike certainly wasn't that sturdy, but it stayed together. I had a good price, and that was all that I needed. But the best part of all of this was the opportunity to get to know the bike shop owner. When I took my bike back to get my tires pumped, we started chatting and we realized that he actually came from the same province as my grandparents. That's the equivalent of going to New York City, running into someone at the coffee shop and realizing that they're also from Minnesota. He shared advice on how to navigate Tsinghua and Beijing after being there for multiple decades. We discussed Chinese and US politics. We talked about the strict COVID lockdowns in Beijing. We discussed the Winter Olympics and made bets on who we thought was going to win. He shared his dream to retire in the next 10 years, to buy a car, retire from selling bikes, and drive his car from the northernmost tip of China all the way down to the southernmost tip as part of a multi-year long road trip. So on my last day at Tsinghua, the afternoon right before I moved out, I stopped by the bike shop one last time to say goodbye before leaving China. And to my surprise, the bike shop owner was there. He said he had been expecting me and revealed a fridge full of Chinese beer. We sat outside the entire afternoon, snacking on salted peanuts with chopsticks, because that's what you do in China, parked right in front of the rotating fan that he kept outside of his shop. Most students had moved out, so the streets were empty and business was slow. And together we enjoyed the last few moments of summer on campus under the warm afternoon sun. This is the magic of negotiation. It's not the end result, but the process and the unexpected bonuses that end up becoming the most meaningful experiences. Thank you, and back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you.